Okay. All right. So, hello everyone. Thank you for joining. I will be talking about vibe coding survival guide in the open source world. My name is Vadim Bauer. I'm one of the maintainers of the CNCF project Harbor, and I'm doing this for a couple of years. If you're interested in my work, you can follow me on LinkedIn and then GitHub, not Twitter. I'm not using it. So you see that the logo is really old, so I copy pasted it from an old slide. And yeah, I'm working basically on the open source project and also on the commercial side of the open source project. And today I would like to talk with you what it means to survive in agentic workflows in open source project, and I will share you what we're looking at in Project Harbor. And then we will take a look at what is the value proposition of open source in general, right? And how does it get disrupted by agentic engineering? And then we'll see what are possible other new values that we can create for open source, and then how other projects are coping with this with the workload, and what are the strategies for our project. And then we'll do some closing thoughts after that. Okay. I started with this presentation probably a year ago, writing it down, and I had a catchy name, Survival Guide, because it sounds really good. There's a bit of a problem with the Survival Guide, because Survival Guide has a connotation that you land on a deserted island, you survive for a couple of weeks, and then you get picked up, and then you're home, and everything is back to normal, right? And I think the problem with this survival guide is that there is no back to normal anymore, right? So there is no way back. And so realistically, this talk should be called adoption guide and not survival guide, because there is no way back. All right, let me show you on Project Harbor. So if you don't know what Project Harbor is, or Harbor is a CNCF, Cloud Native Foundation open source project around container registry. So it's a container registry based on Docker distribution, and we slapped around the registry, authentication, authorization, policies, groups, rules, garbage collection, and all that stuff, and ship it as a project to the community. And we commercialize it as well. So Project Harbor is fairly popular, I would say, right? So it sits below Envoy and above Cilium, right? It is a fairly popular project, but it's not on everyone's mind, right? It's a core infrastructure product. It's running, and if it's running, nobody cares. So we're basically a bit quiet, right? So our project is a bit quiet. There's not so many community going on. It's not as popular as Kubernetes or Prometheus or Helm, or other popular project, So it's a bit quiet. So how does the reality look like in Project Harbor? So there's a clicker here. Oh yeah, perfect. Oh, it doesn't make sense. All right. So this is how a typical project in Harbor looks like. So I'm currently working on a project called Harbor CLI. It's a CLI for Harbor. It's a different UI. And since recently, GitHub introduced a new pill. So you like information. So you can see if what type of PR this is, or from who it is, right? And you see now some indicator that is a first-time contributor, right? And if you look at the PRs, they are from a couple of hours ago. So there's like new contributor, new contributor, new contributor, new contributor, contributor, new contributor, or first-time contributor, contributor, bot, right? So the bot is in minorities. And mostly it's like first-time contributors. And this goes on. In the issues, it's the same, right? You can see also on the title, right? So there's all following the convention log. You see a bug, problem description, and then there is a PR for that immediately, right? And everything within 1 hour, right, from the same person. So, and this is just a normal Tuesday. Harbor Satellite is a different project. the same thing, right? Most contributions, first-time contributor. This is the main project. You see, main project PR. This was, I think, from Tuesday. Yeah, like first-time contributor, 5 PRs from one person, right? So the list goes on and on. And you can see it also in the stats. So we have the Linux Foundation have a dashboard, stats dashboard, with active contributions, and you can see that it's projected to be really high in May. And then you can see the pull requests are going up. And this is just from last year, like last year, and it's already last year. You could already notice it last year that the contribution started to go up. So I should have maybe plotted it over the last 4 years or so. You see pull requests going up, the issue resolution time goes down, right? And so this is like what I observed over the last years. I joined the project like 6 years ago, and like maybe 1 or 2 years ago, we had maybe like 1 or 2 new issues per day. Now we have like 5 to 10 issues per day. We had around 1 or 2 external PIs from new contributors or contributors, not the maintainers, around 1 or 2 contributions per month. Now we have 1 or 2 contributions per day. Then the other important part, we had like 1 to 5 vulnerability reports per year. So there's like people reaching out in private and disclose the vulnerabilities they found or claim they found, and it's oftentimes people kind of doing reports around Harbor. So they hire a company that does audit reports, and they send us like 200 pages PDFs with findings that they found. And this happened maybe like 1 to 5 times per year, and now we have it 1 to 5 times per week. Right. So each report takes at least a day to look at. Right. You can see it's a full-time position already. And as you can guess, it is super difficult to distinguish between signal and noise, because all PRs, all issues look good on the surface, and you need to put a lot of effort to analyze them if it's really worth looking into and analyze that. And so how should we solve this, right? And to be honest, I don't know. But I think most of the people don't know it. But before we try to solve it, we need to understand what is the value of open source. Why is open source so interesting and lucrative, right? And so there's multiple points, I think like 7 points, and I just highlighted the 5 most important ones, more or less in that order. So the most important value of open source is this shared engineering economics, right? So if people come together, they develop on a product, and together you can build more than alone. The other part is like the distribution of like freely available software. Everyone can use it, download it. It gets popular. People use it and gets feedback. So you get this network effect and cycle. There is also the trust that you can analyze the code, you can see it. So there's also like all the why, yeah. But it's just kind of summarizing, right? And when we look at the at this list, not all points are equal, right? So some points are heavier than the others, and I think in the open source, the most heaviest points have always been the shared engineerings, right? Right? I mean, you can get away with a shitty community, right? I mean, Linux had a shitty community for ages and was the most popular product, right? You can get away with trust and transparency. Look at NPM and Node.js, right? You can get away with it. You can get away with a lot of these things not working properly, but you cannot get away without good and shared engineering, right? So if people don't contribute and code together, you will not get a good product. Well, guess what? With agentic software engineering, this undercuts the whole value, right? So what is left if it is super easy to create software, right? So is the whole open source value proposition or the ecosystem going to collapse? Maybe not, I don't know. But it's important to think about it and see how we can cope with it maybe as open source project or as an individual, benefiting from open source, contributing to open source, or selling open source product like what we do. So we are in all those boats. And yeah, and so since this whole thing changes, we need to find alternatives or find ways how we can cope with that, with the new reality. And one, of course, option is, or important part is, that we need to subsidize this engineering power with other values. So if you have basically free engineering, you need to be good on the other side, like on the distribution side, on the community side, on the trust side, right? And so we can try to compensate this and still have a community around it, right? Because if everyone can build a new project and fork each other, there is little value in selecting one project over the other, because they're all similar, and yeah, it becomes really difficult for users to choose what to select. And this is already the case, right? So there's like millions of new projects on GitHub, and it's super difficult to choose those. So we need to kind of move up the stack, build around trust, creation, human judgment, right? So what should the project consist of, right? So if we just let the agents loose, they build everything we say, right? But it doesn't mean that it should be built, right? Yeah, and since you know, we can generate code as much as we want, this means all that forks become trivial, right? So we will see more and more project forks, and people will fork their project and just use their own fork, and maybe not contributing back, or don't care if contributions back don't work. And I think a lot of those foundations currently are really proposing the strategy. I think that's also in their own interest, because they see that the open source project ecosystem changes, and so they also fear that their own legitimate existence is threatened, right? And so they're proposing around the trust and security and this community part a bit, you know. So how other projects are doing that? So if we take a look in the wild, how other projects are doing it, and I think the easiest part is, you know, to just ban AI, or try to ban AI. I mean, it's a strategy, right? I don't say it's the right one. Some projects force people to contribute to expose AI generated PRs, so say that they should disclose it, and this way they hope to be able to judge if it's good quality or bad quality, which is also a bit difficult, right? You can disable PRs, right? So you can disable all contributions to your project, which is a legitimate option, right? You can ignore all the contributions. You know, this is what we are doing. Mostly, or other projects are doing it the same, right? So because the problem is just the sheer amount. You cannot cope with that, right? So the only reason, or the only option, is to ignore it for now, and then you can build guidelines, rules, and you can try to ban bad actors, which is also difficult, right? You know, there's a lot of those methods are short-sighted, and I'm not sure that any of those methods will decrease the amount of PRs or contributions to an open source project, especially if the project is popular. So what should we do instead? Okay, I think good guidelines and rules for humans and AI are definitely important. They should be there. Most of projects lack thereof. We should, of course, do more testing and create tests. But I think we should not just have the unit and end-to-end tests that are usually known. We should also have tests on the next level, or a higher level. And this means we should have test against the roadmap, test against the project scope, right? So basically, test against let's say the layer 8, right? So basically, trying to not reduce the amount of PRs, because the amount of PRs will not go down, but we can at least steer it a bit, or improve the quality. And then, of course, this means the project need to have a clear roadmap, a clear narrow project scope, right? Because it's easier to fork, it's easier to develop code, it makes me more sense now maybe to create multiple projects, right? So you have your core projects, and then you have your other side projects, so that you could take off the load of the main project. Maintainer onboarding, there's a common problem, right? So we should onboard the maintainer, and we should also not treat maintainers as developers, because this becomes less and less important, right? So there are other ways of how project maintenance becomes more important, right? Because if we're talking about the code part that was important in the past, and we're now focusing on the other parts, the code will not be that important, but all the other parts will be more important, like community, like trust, and joint vision, right? So these parts are more important. And the other part is, of course, knowledge transfer. Like all open source projects suffer from bad knowledge transfer. And there is interesting document about knowledge transfer. And I remember it from my time at the university. And there are a few different types of knowledge and knowledge types. And those knowledge types are relevant also in the AI age, right? I think the easiest one is explicit knowledge. This is something you can write down. There's documents, you can manuals. So this is the easiest way of, or not the easiest way, but the foundation. And then there's the implicit knowledge, right? So this is this ingrained experience, and oftentimes difficult to articulate. This type of knowledge, this implicit knowledge, you can transfer into explicit knowledge, right? You can write down, you can create manuals, you can work with that, and this is also in the scope of AI. So AI is able to help with that, but what we cannot do is this tactic knowledge, right? So this is not something that we can share with AI, or we cannot train an AI model to cope with that. So this is like kind of a human-to-human interaction, and this is something important in open source projects, and it will become more and more important. It is also related to AI, right? So like this is also related to other areas of software engineering, not only to open source. So what are the challenges on the road to be able to cope with the new demand, or to cope with the new reality? I mean, one of the typical challenges that I see is that developers want to code, right? And when we're talking about the other areas that become more important, this means that communication and collaboration becomes key, And as you know, like we as developers, this is the key competency of every developer: is communication and collaboration, right? So that's like that. All the developers are good at communicating. So this means that we need, I think, long term, we need to have a new generation of open source contributors, maintainers. New generation, or a new mindset if people want to work or keep on working in the open source ecosystem, right? Because I think it requires more of other skills than being good at coding. That's all right. So let's take a look at how we are trying to cope at the project with this the new reality, and the thing is that since we don't know how it will turn out and what works and what doesn't work, because nobody knows really what works and what doesn't work, we're trying, of course, multiple things, right? So currently, as I said, we ignore a lot of the PRs that seem to be like a bit shady or a bit odd. So that's the reality. We try to build rules and guidelines for agents, for humans. All this information that was basically kind of given from one maintainer to one other maintainer over the generations, over the years. And so we try to encode this information as much as we can. We try to, of course, use AI agents and all that stuff to enforce these rules, to check the things. So we're using a lot of those tools as well. But we need to also do a bit more on the contributor side, right? So there's a one famous saying from Cervantes in Don Quixote, and there was also from Wolfgang Goethe, who said, like, tell me who your friends are and I tell you who you are, right? And I think we can translate this also to to agentic engineering. Show me your prompt and I tell you who you are. So I think this really matches perfectly, because the outcome is not as important as the input. I think the input becomes more important than the output, because based on the input, the output may differ and vary. Right? You get, for a little snippet of input, you get a huge output, right? So the leverage is huge. So this means that the input must be really, really important. And I think we should, in the project, which we are kind of doing it in a kind of way, but we're not communicating it, I think we should not accept any PRs in the project, or we should discourage people from contributing PR because of the input. The input is more relevant. And people should rather expose their business requirements, expose what they're trying to achieve, and then we should try to align what the people are trying to achieve with other people, so that there is a reason to build this feature. Because it is super easy to build features now, right? But the question is really, does the world need this feature, right? Or does everyone need this feature, or is it just you, right? And I think this becomes more and more important, and this means, like, that's why feature PRs become more and more irrelevant in a project, because I mean, we have the same tools as everyone else, right? But we have the knowledge, the experience, and the roadmap, and all these areas where we could contribute more to the outcome than any other contributors who just thinks that they need this feature, right? So I think this might be one way to cope with the demand. And then, of course, we need to get more contributors as maintainers. So we should treat contributors as maintainers. We should onboard them easier and faster, and we should be able to delegate some work to the to new maintainers. So basically, if you're contributing a PR, and we say, yeah, it's a good PR, from now on, you're responsible for the PR forever, right? So this becomes basically your responsibility. You don't have access to every code, right? You cannot do everything, but you're responsible for this part of PR. So some of those ways where we could easier grant people the permission to be the maintainer without exposing or opening up risk that people will do something that they should not do. Another part, which I think it's kind of a lucrative and also interesting to think about, is making the project easy to fork and to maintain. So if you have a project that's easy to fork and easy to maintain, this will also take off some load from PRs and contributions. So people can just fork it and use it their way. And then if you think that someone else did a good job, you can just cherry pick it or see if this feature evolves and get used. So there is it has some advantages in this concept. Okay. And the other part, like on the software itself, so I think we should also change our software to become more agentic friendly, right? So, that's just kind of a standard phrase, like make code easier to maintain, right? So it's a kind of a bullshit phrase, but I mean this time we have to really do it. so we have to really do it this time, right? So because it's super important, because agentic workflows and agentic code is a multiplier, right? It's an amplifier, right? You have good code, you put a little input in, you get good output. You have bad code, you put a little input, you get bad output, right? So it's a kind of a 10x multiplier, and it goes in both ways. And that's why it's super important to have a really good code quality, but also structure, and also guidelines how to build and where to build and how to evolve the code, right? So we should work more on that as well. And then providing extension points. So instead of people providing PRs, if we would have an extension points, more extension points, people would just build something and extend it, right? So there would be no need to create PRs. Like other points, like back channel. So if people are using new features, we want to know if they're using those features, because we don't want to have too much code in our code base, or implement a lot of features that nobody's using, right? So kind of those metrics and usage metrics and bug reports that I can get back easy makes a lot of sense. And I think like the Android Android, iOS, they're really good at it because they have like millions of devices, people are using it, and this ecosystem is a good good benchmark. Of course, yeah, smaller attack surface images, like less dependencies, right? Because we can do more with agentic code, agentic engineering, we can get rid of a lot of third-party dependencies, right? Because a lot of times there's just the one function that we're using, and then it makes more sense to get rid of the dependencies and just re-implement this functionality or copy and paste this functionality into the code because it becomes easier to maintain. Yeah, and I think for us, we're working on the feature flags feature, so we want to make sure that we can release new features really easily and fast, and also give the features into the hands of the user faster than before. And if we hide them behind feature flags and call them sandbox, we are making the users kind of as contributors because they can test this functionality, right? They can test and verify if it's working, is it performing well, and all those things. And then once it's performing well, we can kind of promote this feature into the main line or make the feature part of the product. Yeah. So I hope you had a kind of a glimpse into how this open source project is working at Harbor and what we're dealing with agentic software. I mean, we are using it ourselves really, really a lot as well. Like we're using agents for software engineering, for testing. We are using them all at the same time. So we're really heavily using it, but still, it's not enough to compensate for the increased amount of influx of PRs, issues, and other challenges. I think I didn't talk about the security part as well. So like the whole vulnerability part, like if there is some vulnerability somewhere, like we have like 500 dependencies or something, or even more, and then keeping track of those is also super difficult. So yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you.